The Holy Father in Africa. Pope Francis continues his three-nation tour by celebrating Mass in Mauritius. We also recap his busy weekend, including his message of hope in Madagascar. Canceled meeting. President Donald Trump says he nearly met with officials from the Taliban on U.S. soil, while lawmakers from both parties are unhappy. Violence in Hong Kong. Police used tear gas to disperse protesters this weekend, how demonstrators are responding. And Our Lady of Charity. The faithful in Cuba line up to honor the country's patron saint. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, September 9th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Pope Francis visits Mauritius and celebrates the diversity of the island nation in the Indian Ocean. It's the last leg of the Holy Father's three-country trip to Africa.
I nostri giovani sono la prima missione.
During his one-day stop in Mauritius, Pope Francis said the Church must evangelize young people first. The Holy Father celebrated Mass with an estimated 100,000 people. Most Mauritians are Hindu. Catholics make up less than a third of the population. Father Don Bosco Onyalla, Editor-in-Chief for EWTN's ACI-Africa, joins us from Port Louis, Mauritius. Father, you attended the Pope's Mass. What was it like to be there, and what was the Holy Father's main message?
Yes, I attended the Pope's Mass in Port Louis in Mauritius. And yes, the number of people who gathered, the diversity of the people in terms of age, culture, nationality, but also the enthusiasm, the energy, the joy that the people had in the songs they sang and the music they heard. Yes, it was just joyful to be with them.
And what did the Pope say to the people? Did he talk about that diversity?
Yes, the Pope acknowledged the diversity of the people in Mauritius, having come from diverse horizons, cultures, backgrounds, civilizations, and that he called on them to strive to live together, to cultivate peaceful coexistence, and to take that diversity as a richness.
Well, also today, Pope Francis visited the shrine of Blessed Jacque Desiree Laval. He was a 19th century French missionary who ministered to freed slaves. Why is he so important to the people of Mauritius?
The Pope has had the strategy of using examples familiar to people in the countries he has visited. Here in Mauritius, he has taken Père Laval, Father Laval, the apostle of Mauritius, as is described here. He was a Spiritan, a French missionary here, who ministered among people, regardless of their culture, background, religion. And he had these medical skills that made him distinguished among the people, and that he served them, loved them unconditionally. And so the Pope gave him as an example of a person who they can emulate, and they're familiar with him.
That's so fascinating to hear about him. Let me ask you, you had mentioned the fact that the Pope has been greeted with much enthusiasm. Do you think the Pope's visit to this tiny island, though, will have a lasting impact on the faithful?
Certainly, this visit will have a lasting impact on the people. The memories of those who are old enough remember the visit of Pope John Paul II 30 years ago. And so this was an event that involved many people. I talked to many people who were involved regardless of the religion, the Hindus, the Muslims, and that they were united in one purpose for this event. And looking at the crowds that were there and the involvement, the enthusiasm, the spirits among the people, and that everything was at standstill, the focus was the Pope. It will have a lasting impact for the people in this tiny island. And above all, they feel that small as they are part of a universal church. So this was very striking for them, and they feel they're part of a bigger family, the family of God, family people of God.
Well, it's so fascinating not just to hear about the Catholic community's enthusiasm, but also about non-Catholics in the country as well, greeting Pope Francis. Father Don Bosco Onyalla, Editor-in-Chief of EWTN's ACI-Africa. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Over the weekend, Pope Francis highlighted the dignity of work and protecting natural resources in Madagascar, a country where 90% of the population lives below the poverty line. Dancers in Madagascar mobbed the Holy Father after performing on Saturday during an evening vigil with 100,000 young people. His rock star popularity showing in a country where some 35% of the population are Catholic. Pope Francis encouraged the country's president to protect the environment, quoting from his encyclical Laudato Si, published in 2015. On Sunday, the Holy Father visited the Akamasoa village, hosted by his former student, Father Pedro Opika, who founded the project. As he arrived, thousands of children sang their hearts out for him in the village auditorium. Speaking in French, he recalled Opika didn't care much for studying.
A lui non plus étudier.
Rather, he wanted to work, and work he did. Father Opika, a native of Buenos Aires, was inspired to uplift the poor through work in a rock quarry and as carpenters. The Holy Father insisted poverty is not inevitable. He told the crowd their progress is proof God heard the cry of the poor.
Si sono trasformati in canti di speranza per voi e per tutti quelli che vi guardano.
A well-known singer in Madagascar says he is grateful for the Pope's outreach.
Yeah, I like the Pope. This one is with the poor people I like. That's one of my fight in Madagascar, to fight poverty and to give hope to poor people.
Pope Francis also paid a visit to a group of about 100 cloistered Carmelite nuns this weekend and celebrated an open-air mass before an estimated 1 million people in Madagascar's capital. Pope Francis will take part in a closing ceremony tomorrow in Madagascar before heading back to the Vatican. President Donald Trump calls off a secret weekend meeting with the Taliban at Camp David. He says it was his idea to hold peace talks and his idea to cancel them after blaming the insurgent group for a deadly bombing. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. The U.S. has been trying to achieve a peace deal with the Taliban to end nearly 18 years of fighting in Afghanistan. But after the Taliban claimed responsibility for a recent attack that killed a U.S. service member, the president says peace talks are off.
They're dead. They're dead. As far as I'm concerned, they're dead. They thought that they had to kill people in order to put themselves in a little better negotiating position. When they did that, they killed 12 people. One happened to be a great American soldier.
Without explanation, President Trump said the U.S. military has hit the Taliban harder in the last 4 days than they've been hit in over 10 years. The Taliban now promise more bloodshed. The Afghan government remains mostly on the sidelines of the U.S. peace effort. And as the president nears possible re-election, his plan to withdraw the remaining 14,000 U.S. troops from Afghanistan remains unfulfilled.
I've been saying from the campaign that we want to get out at the earliest possible time. We're doing a very good job. Our soldiers are incredible, but they're serving as policemen to a large extent.
The president says he'd like to get the troops out of Afghanistan, but it has to be the right time. President Trump said he called off those Taliban negotiations after a U.S. service member was killed in recent attacks, even though 9 other Americans have died since June 25th in Taliban-orchestrated violence. More than 2,400 American troops have been killed in nearly 18 years of war. Wyatt?
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. North Korea says it is willing to resume nuclear talks with the United States. The vice foreign minister says the discussions may resume later this month. But first, the United States must put forth negotiations that satisfy Pyongyang. Talks between the countries fell apart in February after President Trump rejected Kim Jong-un's demand for relief from sweeping sanctions. Troops from the United States and Turkey conducted their first joint ground patrol in Syria. The exercises are part of a so-called safe zone. Istanbul hopes the buffer will keep Kurdish fighters away from its border because it considers them a threat. U.S. forces say the Kurds are allies. Thousands of students in Hong Kong formed human chains in protest after another night of violence. The former British territory's government condemns the protests and warns the United States to stay out of its affairs. Violence erupted yesterday after demonstrators vandalized subway stations and blocked traffic. In response, police fired tear gas. It was the latest in a series of pro-democracy demonstrations. Joining me now by Skype from Hong Kong is Katharine Lee, a member of the Hong Kong Federation of Catholic Students. Katharine, welcome in. You took part today in one of the student human chains. What message were you guys hoping to send?
We think the human chains is a form of peaceful demonstration, and we would like to say that we still want to insist that the 5 demands, not one less, is that we think that our Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, announced the withdrawal of the bill is a bit late, and we think that she's not sincere enough, because we think such announcement is just talking about putting the withdrawal in the motion, but not a complete withdrawal and an official withdrawal as what we are asking for. And she has not yet give any answer to the other 4 demands that we asked for. So we think we do not accept her announcement of withdrawal of the bill.
I want to ask you, because again, you're part of the Federation of Catholic Students there. What role are Catholic students in particular playing in the demonstrations?
We usually organize some prayer meeting when there is some march or assembly. And we think this is a peaceful way to show what we want from the government. So, and we also think that giving and offering our prayer to the God could help us to get near to what we want, and to ensure that we can keep calm and not putting others into harm, even though like we're just kind of angry with what the police have done in recent arrest and the violence act in the MTR station.
Yes, I can imagine that being there at some of these protests can be pretty scary, Katharine. Can I just ask you about you personally? I mean, how do you lean on your faith, or do you lean on your Catholic faith to help you as you go out, as you protest, as you call for these changes? Because like I said, some of these can be pretty scary scenes.
Yes, I truly lean on my faith and rely on God, because I know a lot of my friends without faith just feel really angry, and they will just some of them I know they will hit the police actually, and they are getting arrested by the police. And what I think that is that even though we are very angry with the police, but as a Catholic, we should still respect that they have their job. But of course, for some of the violence or mass arrests, we know that the police is just doing all of this unreasonably. But we should try to forgive them in some sense, as we're Catholic, and we should still keep our faith and hope with God.
Yeah, that's such a powerful message to remember the idea of forgiveness. Katharine Lee, a member of the Hong Kong Federation of Catholic Students, thanks so much for taking time to be able to talk with us.
Thank you.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says Britain can leave the European Union next month without a deal, but he would prefer one to be in place.
Yes, of course, we could do it. The UK could certainly get through it, but be in no doubt that outcome would be a failure of statecraft for which we would all be responsible.
Johnson was speaking alongside Ireland's Prime Minister in Dublin. The Irish leader says a no-deal departure would cause economic problems for his country. Also in UK politics, John Bercow is resigning as Speaker of the House in Parliament. He will leave his position at the end of October. The decision is in keeping with the tradition a speaker should not serve too many terms. Bercow has been in his powerful post since 2009. A Catholic priest pays tribute to former Zimbabwe leader Robert Mugabe. Mugabe died late last week at the age of 95.
He tried his level best to live according to his Christian values.
Father Kennedy Mugute says there are mixed feelings about the former leader, who was a practicing Catholic, but adds we all have our strengths and weaknesses. Mugabe, an ex-guerrilla leader, became head of the country in 1980 and ruled until he was forced to resign 2 years ago. Coming up, an update on the search and rescue efforts in the Bahamas following the deadly Hurricane Dorian. Search and rescue teams in the Bahamas are still looking for survivors after Hurricane Dorian. The devastation on the Abaco Islands has forced many residents to evacuate. Officials say it will take several weeks to recover all the victims, and many may not be found at all. Our United Nations correspondent Sabrina Farisi joins us in studio with more. Sabrina?
Wyatt, Bahamians have experienced many hurricanes before. In 2016, Hurricane Matthew hit as a Category 4, and last year Hurricane Irma just missed the northwest of the Bahamas. But nothing could have prepared them for Dorian. Relief for the thousands stranded in apocalyptic conditions.
Anyone that wants to leave can leave. We have ships coming in back and forth all day taking folks out.
In Marsh Harbor, they line the port hour after hour with one thing on their minds.
Right now, food ain't even matter to me right now. All I want to reach is just to get on that boat.
Lugging belongings they had scavenged from demolished homes and lives, thousands were finally evacuated.
Hello? Hey, Millie. Hey. This Ann. You all right? Yeah, Millie, I okay.
Ann Wilmore was letting her family know she was okay and getting on a boat. It's little solace, though. She still has friends and relatives she hasn't heard from since the storm. The government has warned the death toll will rise dramatically, a fact already known to those who lived through this. Search dogs are on the islands, but strained already from the overwhelming job at hand. The UN is one of the organizations assisting in rescue and relief efforts. They have sent 1.5 tons of life-saving supplies, including water purification tabs.
We are responding immediate needs, but at the same time we are trying to understand who are the most needed, the humanitarian assistance, especially those populations, undocumented migrants are our main concern.
And morticians at this makeshift morgue say they are still waiting for the real work to begin. The grim task of recovery will be a challenge, they say, as bodies are submerged, others buried alive. Bahamian and USAID officials confirm that based on aerial and ground assessments, the Abaco Islands remain a priority for search and rescue, nowhere more so than the Mud, a Haitian neighborhood savagely flattened by this storm.
You know, and I passed yesterday, and there was one laying here, and there was one laying there. And this is the beginning of the Mud.
William Davis barely survived. This boat ended up on the rooftop of his business. That's how ferocious the surge was. He knows why the death toll so far won't stand.
No way. I think it's going to be astonishing, the death number.
How many do you think, even from people you know?
Because, you know, just from right here, we have, 4 from right here.
He believes those 4 victims were swept away to sea, and that could be Dorian's indelible legacy. Not just the destruction, but the fact that loved ones now counted as missing may never be found. The Archbishop of Nassau, Archbishop Pinder, has appealed to Catholics around the world to help meet the needs of the people. He posted a video on the Archdiocese website last week, and he said that at least 70,000 people were affected and many were left homeless. Wyatt?
Sabrina, what do the people in the Bahamas need right now?
Right now, they need their basic needs met. They need food, water, shelter, clothing. But something else that Archbishop Pinder said is that many of them need spiritual and psychological help. Many of them are in a state of shock. I interviewed many people last week, and they are traumatized.
Okay, where do people can go? Where do they donate?
Okay, so Archbishop Pinder is saying that you can donate to the Archdiocese of Nassau, Catholic Charities USA, Other great organizations are the Red Cross, the Grand Bahama Port Authority, and the Rotary Club.
A lot of great organizations. Obviously, people, our viewers will be praying for them. Hopefully they can donate as well. UN correspondent Sabrina Farisi. Thanks, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Up next, an important relic saved from the blaze at Notre Dame Cathedral is shown to the public. And Catholics in Cuba honor Our Lady. Congress returns from a 6-week summer recess. Democrats are pushing for background checks on all gun sales, and Senate Republicans are working to confirm the president's nominees. But those aren't the only immediate concerns for lawmakers. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi previews the work ahead. Jason?
White lawmakers have until the end of the month to pass a spending bill to stop another government shutdown. President Trump is asking Congress to pass his replacement for NAFTA, and Democrats are making first moves in a possible impeachment investigation. Democrats talking amongst themselves whether that could hurt the party in 2020.
The House Judiciary Committee could vote on rules for impeachment-related hearings. It's similar to procedural votes at the beginning of impeachment investigations of Presidents Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton.
I think they should go ahead with the process and see where it leads.
Democratic presidential candidate Michael Bennet warns about going too quickly.
In Watergate, there was a big effort to bring the American people along. We need to make sure we're bringing them along too, so that we don't inadvertently create a situation where Donald Trump is running for re-election based on an acquittal that Mitch McConnell has given him in the Senate.
Private emails from top Republican staffers shared with me mock the expected vote. Any committee vote this week is completely meaningless because the full House hasn't acted. So this is just for show. It's just a stunt and means nothing. Over in the Senate,
give our lawmakers courage.
The chamber will confirm more of President Trump's nominees.
Good morning. Welcome to vote.
How will 2020 voters react to Washington politics?
Did you vote? Did you vote? Did you vote?
We'll get a test case tomorrow in North Carolina.
I want to send a bit of a message to the extent that I can, to Congress that we need a different direction than just business as usual.
Residents in North Carolina's 9th congressional district will return to the polls in a race thrown out last year for voter fraud. Now,
thank you for voting.
Republican Dan Bishop faces Democrat Dan McCready.
Thanks for voting.
And tonight, President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence will be rallying in North Carolina, campaigning for Dan Bishop. He's the sponsor of that state's bathroom bill, which would have required people to use the bathroom of the sex listed on their birth certificate. Wyatt?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. The Crown-of-Thorns relic saved from the flames of Notre Dame Cathedral in France was presented to the public late last week. The faithful were given a rare glimpse of the relic at a church in Paris. It was only the second time it has been removed from the safe at the Louvre Museum, where it's now being kept. The crown is believed to have been placed on the head of Jesus at his crucifixion. It was obtained and brought to Paris by King Louis IX in the 13th century. Hundreds of pilgrims gathered in Cuba to honor their country's patron saint. Archbishop Juan Garcia Rodriguez, who will be made a cardinal next month, led the procession to honor Our Lady of Charity. Pilgrims held banners and religious icons while praying and chanting hymns as they walked through Old Havana. Finally tonight, a group of Franciscan friars are celebrating the 100th birthday of their oldest living member. The friars from Our Lady of the Angels province held a birthday mass Saturday for Father Lucjan Krolikowski. The Polish native is famous for his work decades ago to protect orphan children from war in his home country. During his life, Father Lucjan also got to know two saints. He studied for the priesthood in St. Maximilian Kolbe Seminary, and St. John Paul II recognized him for his work with Polish orphans. And we at EWTN also wish Father Lucjan a very happy birthday as well. With that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.